Revenge with Karen.
I don't care what your calendar says, Karen. When I say jump, you ask how high. That was Blake's welcome speech. First day on the job, and this smug walking LinkedIn post in a $900 blazer decided he was the sun, and we were all just office plants trying to earn our daily photosynthesis. I remember sitting in that meeting room, watching him smile with all the warmth of a tax audit. Half the department stared down at their shoes, like hostages who knew the ransom wasn't coming. Blake was the board's golden boy, VP of Operations, hired with phrases like fresh perspective and results-oriented change agent still echoing off the walls. He looked like he practiced his smirk in front of a mirror. Came in preaching efficiency and performance metrics. His version of streamlining meant slicing through human decency with the precision of a deli slicer set to sole shred. And let me be clear, I wasn't some doe-eyed newbie. I'd been there 8 years. I was the duct tape holding that damn company together while executives took credit and interns mistook me for HR because I actually got things done. First week, he scrapped our weekly team syncs, said they were bloated, replaced them with performance pulse checks, which was code for calling people into his office, closing the door, and grilling them like overcooked tilapia. Folks came out pale, twitchy. Some cried in the bathroom. Others took sick days that never ended. I started keeping an unofficial head count. First to vanish was Liz from QA, no goodbye email, then Marco from DevOps, then Eliza, then Tom. Every one of them got called into a one-on-one and poof, off the Slack channels by sunset. At first, I thought maybe they'd snapped. Burnout's real in tech. But then Blake scheduled my first feedback chat, said we needed to align expectations, said I needed to rebrand my energy. I asked what the hell that meant. He said, try being less Karen about things, like it was a joke, like I was supposed to laugh. I didn't. And from that day on, I swear he made it his full-time hobby to pick at me, pulled me out of team meetings, criticized my email tone, told me I was a little too legacy for some of our new initiatives. I was 42, not 90. I didn't even own a cat sweater. But sure, let's go ahead and age shame the one person still meeting every deadline. HR, they were useless. Said if I didn't have anything in writing, it was all subjective interpretation. One HR rep literally told me he's just adjusting the culture. Give it time. Give it time. My team looked like survivors of a spiritual gas leak. The culture was adjusting all right into a ditch. I started coming in earlier, staying later. Not to impress Blake, hell no. Just to shield the few people left. We were bleeding out talent, and every time I tried to raise the alarm, I got the same company Kool-Aid spoon-fed back to me. Change is hard, but necessary. Meanwhile, the guy was walking around quoting Steve Jobs and printing out pie charts about time theft. I wish I were kidding. He had an actual slide titled The Silent Cost of Bathroom Breaks. I wish I had saved that file just for laughs. And hey, if you're still listening, first off, bless your soul. Second, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and toss us a like. Not just for me, but for the ghost of Liz from QA. Once coded an entire backend module from her kid's orthodontist's waiting room and still got called low visibility. It keeps this whole operation running, and we appreciate the hell out of you for it. Anyway, back to the slow-moving psychological car crash. Blake's chaos wasn't loud. It wasn't office-throwing, desk-flipping drama. It was quiet erosion. He'd forget to CC me on critical threads. Cancel meetings I was supposed to lead. Once, forwarded a report I made, cut off the header, and signed it himself. When I called it out, he smiled and said, "We're a team, right?" I remember standing in the supply closet one Thursday afternoon, pretending to restock sticky notes just so I wouldn't cry in front of anyone. I was tired. Not just tired, bone tired. The kind of tired you get when you're constantly bracing for impact, but the car crash never comes. It just keeps pushing you into the guardrail, again and again. But I wasn't quitting. No, I was too stubborn for that, or maybe just stupid. Or maybe I was starting to understand that sometimes survival isn't just about keeping your job, it's about keeping your sanity. I didn't know it yet, but the quiet war had already started. And the first weapon I'd pick up wouldn't be a complaint form or an email. It'd be something a hell of a lot more powerful. A voice. Fourth time someone left Blake's office looking like they'd aged a decade, I started tracking the pattern. He always scheduled these feedback chats after lunch, like he knew people were at their weakest, midday caffeine crash, full stomach, soft brain. The door would close, and 45 minutes later, someone would come out hollowed. Eliza clutched her phone like a lifeline. Marco had a nosebleed. Jenna, tough as nails Jenna, went straight to her desk, grabbed her purse, walked out without even logging off. Never came back. IT disabled her badge by morning. The company email said she'd moved on to exciting opportunities. Translation: she got emotionally curb-stomped by a dude who probably rehearsed dominance cues in the mirror every morning. I kept hoping someone higher up was watching. That someone in HR would notice how many exit interviews were piling up. But no. HR sat on their hands like unpaid interns, mumbling phrases like leadership transition and growing pains. Meanwhile, Blake strutted around the office like he'd just invented synergy. New policies sprouted like weeds, random performance audits, mandatory attitude assessments, weird little Excel trackers about how long people hovered near the coffee machine. One guy got flagged for chronic kitchen loitering. Another got written up for recurring slack tone. I asked what the hell that meant. HR shrugged. That is when your messages seem negative even if they technically aren't. I looked at the printout. The negative message was, "Sure, I can get that done by Friday." That was it. Then it was my turn again. Blake called me in for a quick alignment touchpoint. That's what he called it. His office smelled like peppermint gum and printer toner. He motioned for me to sit. Didn't look up from his laptop. Just said, "Karen, I've been getting some feedback about your presence." Presence? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. You come off as sharp, defensive, sometimes even cold. We need you to work on softening your tone, showing more gratitude. Gratitude, I repeated. For the opportunities this company provides you, he said, finally meeting my eyes. A little humility goes a long way. I looked at the whiteboard behind him. It still had the words Value Creators vs. Value Consumers scrawled across it from some meeting he'd hosted with only the male leads on the invite list. I stared at him for a full 10 seconds, just breathing, thinking, cataloging every word, every flick of his smug little eyebrows. Then I stood up and said, "Got it. I'll try harder to smile while hemorrhaging sanity." He smiled. That's the spirit. Back at my desk, I typed up everything I could remember from the meeting. Every quote, every phrase, every smug intonation. I saved it to a folder labeled MISC Notes, buried under client onboarding templates. I didn't know why I was doing it exactly. Just that something inside me had cracked open, and what was leaking out wasn't rage, it was precision. That's when I started seeing things for what they were. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just a tough quarter or a bad manager. It was a rot spreading under the laminate floors and inspirational posters. The system wasn't failing. It was working exactly as designed to protect power and punish dissent. Blake didn't need HR to like him. He just needed them to fear rocking the boat. And judging by their glassy stares and verbal gymnastics, they were practically doing synchronized backflips to stay neutral. I went to them once more, just to be sure. I scheduled a meeting with Tessa from Employee Relations. I came in with a list of incidents, dates, names, patterns. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Spoke like someone reading a damage report from inside a slowly sinking submarine. Tessa nodded sympathetically. Then she said, "Karen, we really appreciate you bringing this to us. Unfortunately, unless we have direct documentation or a formal complaint with corroboration, it's hard to take action. It becomes a matter of interpretation." I stared at her. You need a body before you'll admit there's been a stabbing. She looked uncomfortable. We just need documentation. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of red wine and my laptop glowing like a campfire. I Googled recording conversations at work, read every link, cross-reference state laws, talked to an old college friend who worked in compliance. One-party consent. That's all it took in our state. If I was part of the conversation, I could record it. No permission needed. No disclosure required. Just a little device and the quiet click of a button. Ordered the recorder that night. Next day, delivery. No one was coming to help. No cavalry. No HR miracle. Just me and now a plan. The recorder was no bigger than a USB stick, sleek, matte black, with a clip that slid easily into the lining of my cardigan. It arrived wrapped in cheap plastic, like it knew the dirty work it was about to witness. I tested it that night by narrating the contents of my fridge. Expired Greek yogurt. 3 sad strawberries. 1 bottle of Chardonnay labeled emergency only, hello, old friend. Playback was clear. Crisp, even, good enough to catch every sigh, every sarcastic chuckle, every veiled threat Blake would pretend was just professional candor. I didn't feel heroic. I felt surgical, precise. The decision didn't come with a dramatic music swell. Just me, sitting cross-legged on the floor, listening to my own voice play back from a tiny speaker, and realizing it would soon carry his. Next time Blake called me in, I didn't flinch. I smiled. I tapped the recorder on under the edge of my blazer as I walked in and gave him my best compliant Karen face, polite, steady, emotionally beige. "Karen, I've noticed a drop in your engagement during team initiatives," he started, eyes already glued to his laptop. "You removed me from all team initiatives," I replied calmly. "Right, it's something we'll need to address in your Q3 performance review," he said, with the kind of tone people use when they know they're holding the shovel and you're already halfway buried. I nodded, said nothing. Let him talk. That meeting gave me 37 minutes of golden tape, passive-aggressive insults, gaslight-flavored word salads, a bizarre tangent about how real leaders build loyalty through pressure. Even told me to imagine a world where your job isn't guaranteed just because you've been here since dial-up. I timestamped that one with a little star. From that point on, every one-on-one became a capture mission. I logged file names like trophies. 2023-07-11, feedback gaslight MP3. 2023-0802, push-out attempt MP3. 2023-0814, that creepy breathing 1 MP3. My laptop became a war chest. My folders, little dossiers of rot. Meanwhile, Blake escalated. He started assigning me projects with impossible turnaround times. Friday 5 p.m. asks due Monday morning. Cross-departmental tasks that required input from people conveniently out of office. Gave me a collaboration objective that required me to work closely with someone who'd been laid off a month prior. I flagged the error. He told me, find a way. He removed me from recurring leadership meetings, saying they were pivoting to a more agile framework. Translation: I was too mouthy, too experienced, too unwilling to drink his flavor of Kool-Aid. I found out he'd held a full QBR meeting without inviting anyone from operations. My team got blamed for delivery delays that stemmed from changes he authorized, off the books, off the record, or so he thought, because I had the record. Some of the tapes were subtle, just enough tone, just enough push to make it clear this wasn't a performance discussion. It was attrition by manipulation. But others, full-blown character assassinations. In one, he told me I lacked strategic femininity, whatever the hell that meant. In another, he said, people like you thrive in chaos. But we're building structure now. People like me? I forwarded that one to my legal friend with just a smiley face. There were days I wanted to scream. I'd get in my car after work, grip the steering wheel, and imagine what it'd feel like to throw a chair through his glass wall just once. But instead, I drove home, poured a drink, and transcribed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was recording, watching, curating evidence like a museum of corporate rot. I gave up trying to fix anything. I stopped defending myself in meetings, stopped pushing back on edits that made no sense. I gave him exactly what he wanted: silence, compliance, a blank screen to project onto. And every time he did, I hit record. The stress was corrosive. I started grinding my teeth in my sleep. My jaw locked so bad I had to buy a mouthguard. I kept eye drops in my drawer because my eyes were always dry from staring at screens too long, reviewing policy manuals, transcribing audio, rereading state consent laws until I could quote them at will. But even with the exhaustion, there was something oddly stabilizing. I had a purpose now, a line in the sand. No more hoping HR would swoop in with a cape and an employee handbook. No more giving people the benefit of the doubt when their whole benefit package was built on throwing others under the bus. I wasn't documenting to get him fired. Not yet. I was documenting because I knew the time would come when he'd try to bury me. And when that day arrived, I wouldn't be flailing. I'd be armed. He thought he was building a case against me. Bless his heart. I was building the autopsy report. It was Jenna who broke first. Not the Jenna who quit months ago, but another one, new hire, same name, different spelling. Jenna with an H, UX researcher, brilliant brain, high anxiety, eyes that darted around like she was always being followed. Blake had called her in for a quick 15-minute sync that ran 55 minutes and ended with her hunched over her desk, typing with trembling fingers. I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. But 2 hours later, she slipped into the break room, closed the door, and whispered, "I think he wants me to quit." I didn't say anything, just nodded once. That was the new Morse code: eye contact, head tilt, silence. It meant, I believe you. 2 days later, it was Malik from Support Ops. Guy was solid, always wore clean polos, and had an Excel trick for everything. Blake had yanked him into a one-on-one, and afterward Malik just sat in his car for an hour, engine off, staring out the windshield. He texted me that night. He said my career ceiling would make things hard for the team if I didn't step back gracefully. What the hell does that even mean? I texted back one word, document. He didn't reply. But the next day, he brought donuts and placed one on my desk with a sticky note that said powdered revenge. We didn't have to say anything more. I was building a quiet alliance, not of rebels, but of survivors. People too tired to fight, but too smart to not see the game. We didn't plan meetings or share everything. That would have made it real, risky. But we dropped little breadcrumbs for each other. A side-eye when Blake walked by. A shared smirk when his team empowerment deck failed to load during a Monday all-hands. Support, not strategy. Not yet. One night, after Jenna forwarded me a summary of her exit interview that HR had redacted into uselessness, I sat at my kitchen counter and opened one of my cleaner transcripts. It was a mid-level recording, nothing nuclear, but clear enough. Blake telling me if people don't fit the new energy, they should consider if they are a cultural match. I highlighted that part, added some timestamps, took out names. Then I sent it to my legal friend with the subject line, hypothetical scenario. She replied in under an hour, perfectly legal in your state. Clean, clear, damning. Not a smoking gun, but definitely matches the fingerprints. I stared at that line for a while. Matches the fingerprints, that stuck with me. The next morning I got the email. Subject, performance review scheduled. The kind of subject line that makes your stomach do Parker. No warning, no quarterly timeline, no checklist. Just a meeting request, 2 p.m. Thursday with Blake and HR. I printed it. Folded it in half, slipped it into the folder I kept under my desk labeled Facilities Backup. Inside that folder was the recorder, extra batteries, my running transcript list, and a printed copy of the employee handbook with all the pages dog-eared where Blake had casually tap-danced on policy. Thursday arrived like a funeral in dress slacks. I wore navy, not because I thought it mattered, but because if someone was going to try and kill my career that day, I'd at least look sharp doing it. Char sat across the glass table, Tessa again, tight bun, tight smile, tight everything. Blake sat beside her, legs crossed like he owned the furniture. His laptop was open. My file was up. He didn't bother with small talk. Karen, thank you for coming. We want to discuss some recent behavioral concerns. Tessa nodded. There have been reports of disengagement, resistance to leadership feedback, and a general lack of collaboration. I didn't blink. From whom? Smiled like a dentist about to upsell you on a root canal. We don't disclose sources in these matters, but multiple individuals have come forward. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notepad. Of course, I'll be taking notes. I clicked my pen, but not before I clicked something else under the table. Blake launched into a monologue. Words like attitude drift, alignment issues, and my personal favorite, toxic veteran energy. I nearly laughed. Called me a veteran like I was some war relic blocking his path to glory. Then he pulled out a printed email. Highlighted section, circled text. It was mine. Mild pushback on a deadline I'd been given with zero context. I'd written, this seems unrealistic given the resource constraints. Apparently, that now counted as hostile communication. We're giving you the opportunity to self-correct, Blake said. But if we don't see measurable improvement, Tessa chimed in, maybe consequences tied to continued non-alignment. I looked from one to the other. Just to confirm, you're initiating disciplinary measures based on anonymous feedback and selectively interpreted emails. Silence. I nodded, wrote it down. The trap had sprung, but they didn't realize I'd seen the cheese days ago. The meeting ended with vague threats and a follow-up scheduled for progress review. I walked out, calm on the outside, adrenaline chewing holes through my ribs. Back at my desk, I renamed the recording. 2023-0921 HR Trap Attempt MP3. I sat there a long time after that, watching Blake walk around like he hadn't just tried to poison my personnel file. He thought I was still playing defense. He didn't know I'd already drafted the opening statement. He waited until Friday. Of course he did. Fridays are where cowards ambush. Too late in the week for backup, too early in the morning for caffeine to sharpen your reflexes. I walked in expecting another status review. Just Blake and Tessa, standard icebox room with the fake plant that looked like it was made from melted Tupperware. But this time, the vibe was different. The projector was on. A single manila folder sat on the table, thick as a legal novel, my name scrawled across it in his too neat handwriting. Karen, Blake said, gesturing to the seat like he was hosting a game show called Ruin Your Career in 30 minutes or less. We need to talk about your conduct. Tessa didn't look at me. That's how I knew it was bad. She just kept fiddling with a pen that didn't click, the kind you twist like she needed something to spin while the world turned upside down. Blake stood instead of sitting. Power move, predictable. He grabbed the folder and slammed it down like a gavel. You've been insubordinate, said repeatedly, publicly, and now privately. He pulled out printed Slack threads, emails, even some calendar events he claimed showed a pattern of resistance. But then, with a dramatic flair like some off-Broadway villain, he slid a sheet of paper across the table. It was a transcript. One of my transcripts. Not the whole recording, just a chopped-up paragraph taken out of context, warped, stripped of the toxic buildup that led to it. Tessa glanced at it, blinked, whispered, "Where did this come from?" Blake looked at me. "We have reason to believe you've been recording private meetings." I didn't answer. Company meetings, he emphasized, are confidential. Recording them without consent is illegal. That's grounds for immediate dismissal. And potentially, he let the word hang, sticky in the air, criminal exposure. Tessa shifted in her seat. That's not clear-cut in every state. Don't interrupt, Blake snapped. She flinched. He turned back to me. Smug now, you think you're smart. You think you can build a little case, twist the narrative. But you've just implicated yourself. HR will review this. In the meantime, you'll step aside, access will be restricted, your keycard deactivated by noon, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. He'd already decided I was done. This wasn't a warning, it was a eulogy. He was just reading it before the funeral. I kept my face blank, not because I wasn't angry, but because fury leaves too much room for satisfaction. He wanted the reaction, the flinch, the panic. He wanted to see me break. Instead, I nodded once, understood. Tessa opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, then closed it. Her eyes found mine. There was something there, regret, sympathy, or maybe just the dawning realization that she'd sat too close to a fire she couldn't put out. I stood up, slow and steady. No drama, no parting words. But just before I reached the door, I turned and said, "Everything I've ever submitted to this company has been with integrity." Blake smirked. "Sure, Karen." I walked out, heels echoing on the tile like punctuation marks. Down the hall, past the break room, past the bulletin board still advertising last quarter's wellness challenge like any of us had the bandwidth to care about steps or smoothies while careers were getting torched for sport. Back at my desk, my monitor was already locked. My inbox frozen. A black zip-tied envelope sat neatly where my keyboard used to be. IT was fast, efficient, like they'd done this before. I didn't cry. I didn't slam anything. I just opened my personal Gmail, attached one final file, one I hadn't shared before. The one with Blake ranting about creating churn to weed out low-value hires, mocking someone's stutter, joking that HR would eat a rock if he labeled it strategic. I sent it to 2 addresses, my legal contact, and the external ethics hotline listed deep in the company's code of conduct page, the one no one ever used because no one ever thought it mattered. Subject line, retaliatory misconduct by Vice President of Operations. I hit send, then I shut my laptop. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. They thought I was gone. They thought they'd closed the book, but I was already writing the appendix. It was nearly 11 p.m. when the email came through. Subject line, internal review request for meeting availability. Sender, Lauren Patel, Corporate Counsel. The body of the email was short, polite, deceptively neutral. Karen, we'd like to speak with you at your earliest availability regarding recent events. Please let us know when you're available for a confidential discussion with our legal team. Best regards, Lauren. No threats, no warnings, no HR CC'd, just legal. My heart thudded once hard, then settled into a strange, steady calm. Not an accusation, an invitation. I stared at the screen, wine glass still in my hand, untouched. The same episode of Forensic Files had been looping in the background for an hour, something about fibers and duct tape. I muted it, opened my folders, dragged everything into a neat little external drive I labeled Continuity Plan. Printed what I could, sorted the rest. Found the crinkled copy of the company's consent policy tucked between old printouts of my PTO history and Blake's infamous efficiency mandates memo, the one where he justified reducing lunch breaks to improve digestion focus. And then, the crown jewel. Form he'd forced all department heads to sign 6 months ago. Performance review consent and coaching feedback documentation acknowledgement. I remembered it because I'd rolled my eyes so hard it gave me a migraine. It was meant to cover his own behind while he recorded us, for quality coaching purposes. But Blake, being Blake, had gotten sloppy with the wording. Page 2, line 6. All parties involved in performance discussions consent to documentation by any method deemed necessary to ensure accountability, including but not limited to written notes and audio recordings. I stared at it for a solid minute. Read it again. Read it out loud. His words, his form, his consent. He'd signed it in that overly slanted signature he used, where the B looked like a pretzel being mugged. I highlighted it in yellow, printed 4 copies. I slept exactly 3 hours that night, dreamless. The next morning, I arrived 30 minutes early. Bypassed the main entrance, my badge wouldn't have worked anyway, and waited in the lobby where legal operated, down in the clean, beige underbelly of the building. Where things didn't get discussed, they got resolved. Lauren met me at the door. Mid-30s, wire-rimmed glasses, calm like a judge about to ruin someone's month. "Karen," she said, shaking my hand, "thank you for coming. Appreciate your cooperation." I followed her into a small room that smelled like old toner and expensive silence. A second lawyer was already seated. Older, stern, no name tag, just a notebook and eyes like a hawk that remembered every rat it had ever eaten. I opened my binder and laid it flat. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to make clear that everything I've brought is in full compliance with our state's one-party consent laws, company documentation policy." Lauren gave a small nod. "That's what we're here to determine." I slid over the first page, then another, then the form. She read it silently. The older man leaned forward. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the highlighted line. "Please," they read it twice. Then he muttered, "Jesus Christ." What followed wasn't drama. It was silence, pages turning, timestamps aligning. Audio clips played through company-issued headphones. I didn't provide all the recordings. Just enough. Just the ones where Blake crossed the invisible line, then backed up, and did it again with a smirk. Threats, mockery, policy violations. A greatest hits of managerial rot. At one point, the older lawyer tapped a page and said, "This matches a complaint we logged last quarter but couldn't substantiate." Lauren looked up. "Did you share this with HR?" I smiled politely. "I tried. Multiple times. They said it was subjective." "Not anymore," the older man said. "This is declarative." Lauren turned to me fully for the first time. "Karen, as of this moment, you're not under review. You're not under investigation. What you've shared is protected under both internal policy and state law." I nodded once. "Good to know." She hesitated. "Do you understand the weight of what you've just given us? Every syllable." And I did. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I wasn't trying to prove I wasn't the villain in some twisted narrative Blake had cooked up to climb the ladder. No, I was something else now. I was the witness. And I had receipts. The email came through at 9:04 a.m. sharp, subject line in all caps like someone had just discovered the caps lock key and a taste for drama. "Final termination, review mandatory attendance." It was from Tessa, of course, HR's favorite marionette, always tugged in the direction of whoever held the sharpest scissors. She CC'd Blake. No legal on the thread, no witness. Just the two of them, playing the finale like it was a high school theater production. The body of the email was brief. "Karen, per recent discussions, we ask that you attend a formal meeting regarding your employment status at 2 p.m. today. Room 3C. Thank you." No mention of the ethics report. No nod to the mountain of evidence I'd hand-delivered. Just the charade, dressed up in corporate formal wear, hoping I'd fold before the curtain dropped. By then, I knew better. I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to the performance review a week prior. Not out of superstition, out of defiance. Like armor that still bore the dents from the last swing. I carried no laptop, no notepad. Just a slim black folder and the weight of certainty in my bones. 2 p.m. sharp. I walked in. Blake was already seated, legs crossed, hand casually draped over the back of the chair like he was lounging in some budget version of a courtroom drama. He wore that cologne again, the one that smelled like arrogance soaked in cedar. Tessa was beside him, staring hard at a blank legal pad, pen trembling just slightly in her grip. And then Lauren, already seated, already flipping through the folder I'd given her 48 hours earlier. Calm, unreadable, immaculate, her presence was a thunderclap dressed in silence. Blake blinked, sat up straighter. His smirk stumbled. I wasn't told legal would be present. Lauren didn't look up. We thought it was important that this meeting be conducted with full clarity. I took the remaining seat, folded my hands, said nothing. Tessa cleared her throat like she was trying to swallow glass. Thank you for joining us, Karen. Wanted to revisit your employment status following the concerns raised last week. Lauren finally looked up. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce an additional document for the record. She reached into her briefcase, pulled out a familiar page. The consent form, the one with Blake's signature, the one with his language, the one where he gave permission, in writing, for all parties to record performance documentation by any method deemed necessary. Lauren slid it across the table, slow and steady, like a royal flush in a barroom poker game. Blake's face contorted, somewhere between confusion and indignation, like a child who just learned that breaking the rules could have consequences after all. This is, he stammered. This was for my use, my reviews. Lauren raised an eyebrow. That's not what it says. Tessa leaned forward, squinting. Is this dated 6 months ago? Yes, Lauren said. It explicitly covers consent for audio documentation in performance meetings involving department heads. That includes Karen. Silence. Blake looked to Tessa like she could save him. She looked to her pen like it might start writing excuses on her behalf. I wasn't made aware she was recording, Blake said, trying to chuckle, trying to regain footing on a stage that was already collapsing beneath him. It feels like entrapment. Lauren didn't blink. Gave consent, in your own words, and the recordings show a pattern of behavior that goes well beyond professional standards. Tessa started to speak again, but Lauren held up a hand. Before we proceed, Karen, do you have anything to add? I looked Blake dead in the eye. No. I think everything worth hearing has already been said. His cheeks flushed. The kind of red that builds behind a necktie when your empire starts to buckle under the weight of your own ego. Lauren closed the folder. Then, with legal present, we'll be concluding this meeting. No decisions regarding Karen's employment will be made at this time. Blake's jaw tightened like he was chewing on a punchline that had turned into ash. I stood, smoothly, calmly, like someone who'd already walked through the fire and come out the other side holding the matchbook. As I reached the door, I turned back. Oh, and Blake, I said, voice steady. Next time you decide to fabricate a paper trail, make sure it doesn't end at your own desk. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because in that room, for the first time, Blake wasn't the one setting the terms. He was the exhibit, and I was just the witness, watching the walls close in. Lauren didn't even bother with preamble. She reached into her sleek black case, retrieved a company-issued tablet, and tapped the screen like she was clocking into a shift at the Truth Factory. A moment later, Blake's voice filled the room. If you can't handle the heat, maybe you should consider a less demanding role, like part-time dog walking. That was followed by the unmistakable sound of him chuckling. Then silence. Then my voice, soft, tired. This project wasn't supposed to be due until next month. Deadlines move, Karen. We're a tech company, not a knitting circle. Another chuckle, this one sharper, meaner. Lauren let the clip play. No commentary. No dramatic pause. Just a slow, surgical stream of audio clips, each one with a date, a time, a location, and Blake's voice hanging himself one sentence at a time. You're not exactly leadership material. You don't inspire, you endure. There's a difference. Maybe if you smiled more, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'm not pushing you out, I'm just saying. Some people leave before they become dead weight. Every line landed like a slap in a soundproof room. No yelling, no profanity. Just the slow suffocation of someone drunk on authority. Death by passive aggression. Tessa went sheet white. She scribbled something in her notes, then froze halfway through the sentence. Blake sat frozen, blinking like a man whose GPS just rerouted him straight into oncoming traffic. His mouth opened once, twice, but nothing came out. Lauren finally looked up. Would you like me to continue? She asked, eyes locked on Blake. He shook his head slowly. No more smirk, no more crossed legs, just a man trying to vanish into the upholstery of a chair that suddenly felt very small. She turned to Tessa. Do you have any questions for Karen regarding her conduct? Tessa opened her mouth, then caught herself. No, no further questions. Lauren closed the tablet. The soft click sounded louder than a gunshot. Effective immediately, she said, sliding a new folder across the table. Any and all disciplinary actions related to Karen will be rescinded. Her access will be restored by COB today. Compensation for missed hours will be reviewed and adjusted accordingly. Blake stiffened. You're siding with her? Lauren turned to him with that calm corporate fire that burns clean. We're not siding with anyone. We're responding to evidence. You signed the consent. You made the statements. You crossed the line. Tessa looked down at her hands, clasped so tightly her knuckles were the color of printer paper. And Blake, Lauren added, you'll be placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. Details will follow shortly via official HR communication. Silence, thick, frozen, sterile. Blake's mouth opened again, desperate for traction. This is political. She's weaponizing the system. Lauren didn't blink. No, you weaponized intimidation. Karen documented it. I stood slowly. Straightened my blazer, picked up the folder I'd brought with me and tucked it under my arm like a blueprint for survival. Still hadn't raised my voice. Still hadn't broken composure. That was the thing about quiet people, we don't strike first. But when we do, we bring receipts. Blake stood too clumsily. This is a mistake. I built this team. I turned to him. Met his eyes, steady as a scalpel. No, I said, my voice low and level. You gutted it. I just turned on the lights. Lauren nodded once. We're concluding this meeting. Karen, you're dismissed. Thank you for your cooperation. And just like that, it was done. Not with fireworks, not with screaming. Just silence, consequence, and a stack of evidence thicker than his ego. I walked out of that room not lighter, not freer, just colder, but in that cold, there was clarity. They tried to erase me. Instead, I'd become the watermark they'd never scrub off. Memo hit inboxes on a gray Tuesday morning. Subject line dry as dust. Policy update internal meetings and documentation protocol. But the contents? A direct result of every recording, every timestamp, every drop of venom I'd siphoned out of Blake's leadership style and served back to the system in its own bureaucratic language. From that day forward, no one, no manager, no VP, no self-anointed emperor of efficiency was allowed to hold a one-on-one without a written agenda and either an HR presence or a full summary submitted to oversight within 24 hours. No exceptions, no backrooms, no shadows. The policy didn't carry my name. Of course not. It was drafted by legal and signed by HR, full of formal tone and legalese. But anyone who'd been in that building longer than a microwave burrito knew exactly where it came from. 2 days later, official announcement came through. Blake Turner employment terminated for cause. No farewell email, no LinkedIn post thanking the company for the incredible journey. Just a deactivated badge and a whisper that maybe, just maybe, not everyone is untouchable. I never saw him again, but I did see the aftermath. Tessa returned my old badge personally. No eye contact, just a quiet, thank you for your patience. I nodded, said nothing. She didn't need the speech. He'd heard the playback. That afternoon, Lauren caught me by the elevators. Karen, she said, we'd like to formally offer you a promotion, Director of Operations. You've more than earned it. I paused, thought about it. The pay bump, the prestige. The chance to put my stamp on the floor I'd practically built with duct tape and caffeine. And then I shook my head. No, I said, but thank you. She blinked. May I ask why? I don't want to manage the fallout, I said. I want to make sure no one has to crawl through it again. Instead, I requested to go back to what I did best. Training, mentoring, documenting. No direct reports, no turf wars, just a clean desk, a clear mission, and a long memory. HR approved it, probably relieved. By Friday, they'd assigned me a temp, a fresh hire named Jordan, bright-eyed and slightly terrified, with 3 highlighters and a penchant for asking if it was okay to take a lunch break. Liked him immediately. I spent the afternoon showing him how our project tracking system worked, what forms to never trust from finance, and why you should always save email threads as PDFs. He took notes like his life depended on it. Before I left, I handed him a blue folder. Worn edges, heavy with quiet weight. The title on the front in plain bold font, How to Survive a Bad Boss Legally. He looked up. Is this like a training manual? I smiled. Something like that. He flipped it open, eyes widening slightly. Did you write all this? Nope, I said, grabbing my bag, but I lived it. As I walked out that evening, past the lobby plants and flickering overhead lights, I realized I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt anchored, grounded in the knowledge that I didn't just survive him, I outlasted the rot he brought in. He used silence as a weapon. I turned it into evidence. The system that ignored me now echoed with my proof. They said the walls had ears. I gave them a voice. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.